So I can explain what those three ways are. I definitely will.
Okay, perfect. All right, here we go. Let's party.
Okay.
Spotlight you, Mark, as
Yes, I
everyone
see. Thank
joins.
you.
The the attention you deserve. All right. Good morning, everyone. Um, oop, I didn't mean to mute you, Mark. I'm just going to auto mute people, but I think you all have the power to unmute yourself. Um, all right. I'm just going to give like 30 seconds for people to keep joining. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, depending, good night. I don't know. Sometimes people come from Australia. Um, Nice to see everyone. And I'm very excited. We've done this workshop or a variation of this workshop once before. This will be slightly different, as they always are. But any opportunity I get to hang with Mark is a good opportunity. I'm guessing that some of you guys have done your own sessions with him. If you haven't, I highly recommend. It's really fun and insightful, and he tells you stories from Kabbalah and does your Sephiroth, and it's excellent if you have a question that you've been deeply pondering and are just sort of trying to understand what might happen, why this might be happening, or how you should proceed. And he claims to not be an intuitive, but I find you very intuitive, Mark. You can deny it all you want. Um, all right, so we are going to try and keep this to like a nice 90 minutes. I'm going to record this. So don't worry if you miss something. I will get it up so that you can rewatch it, refer back. Um, and we can all practice because I would love to have real affinity with tarot, and I don't have it yet. All right, so Mark, happy Saturday.
Good morning.
Um,
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, regardless, wherever you are.
yes, thank you for doing this. I know we're going to do a three card spread. Yeah,
Yes, that we will get. That is the the
intention.
direction we're going to, and yes, and we will get there.
Okay. All right. So, do you want to sort of take us through? Should we share? Do you want to? Should we get going?
Yes, I guess so. So before I share my screen, just to let you know, I mean, we're going to go through a bit of a PowerPoint presentation. Hope you don't mind that. Sometimes it feels like you're in an office when we do this sort of thing. But I think the goal is for it to be much more fun and deep than that. Let me see if I can get that started. I'm always a little, what is the word, discombobulated when I do this sort of thing.
Me too. I still don't know how to do it. Isn't that wild?
Yeah,
Six
that's all
years
right.
in.
So you should be seeing my second screen.
Yes.
And then now I'm going to go to, let's see, here we go, presenter view. And you should be seeing the first slide in the presentation.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So the title of today's class or workshop is What's Your Story? Discovering the graphic novel of your life with tarot. Because really, this is visual storytelling. And here you see a three-card spread right here on the front of this presentation. And, I tell people you look at the images and, you just make a story out of it. That's just what we do. Because, three quotes, one of the things that I really love, one of my favorite tarot teachers, Rachel Pollack, said about everything basically is that it's all story. A great Hasidic proverb is God made humans because God loves stories. And that the tarot, according to Calvino, is a machine for constructing stories. So, what are we going to do today? We're going to learn to see a card completely free of story. You know, the very first thing we need to do before looking at a card and creating a story in our head about it is to actually look at what's going on. So we just want to see the story, see it free of a story, see the facts of what's in the card. Then we want to open to the many stories in a card, not your story, but the different stories that are alive in the images. And from there, we'll look at how to find your personal meaning and story in a card. And then we'll look at some different systems of interpretation and how different decks tell different stories. We're going to look at the relationships between cards and how to find the thread, to steal a metaphor from Elise, in a spread, and use a variety of 3-card spreads to explore and tell the different stories of your life. So, you already know visual storytelling. You learned it long before you learned how to read, and that's what tarot is. It's visual storytelling. You know, first that was a panel from the comic strip Henry. Many of you, if you're mothers, you may recall telling this story to young children. There's basically no text in this story. It's just a gorilla stealing the keys from the zookeeper and letting all the animals out. It's a fun little book. And you can follow the story with no text whatsoever. It's one of the things I love. And of course, tarot is visual storytelling, but it doesn't have to be complicated. When you look at these 3 cards and you think about them in a linear way, going from left to right, so that you think, you look at the 3 of Swords, the 6 of Swords, and the 10 of Pentacles, they can be telling a story. Of course, depending upon what the interpretation and what the question is, the story can be different. It can be a story of heartbreak, looking at the 3 of Swords, or it can be a story of betrayal, right, which is not necessarily about a relationship. The second card, is about getting away, about traveling away from something, or at least it can be, but there are many ways we can interpret this. And the last card is the 10 of Pentacles, which shows a group of people in a brighter, cheerier scene. So you have the makings of, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of a linear story. The question is, how do you fill in the details? Well, before we actually, start creating stories from a tarot card, the best thing to do is just to see a card free of the story we want to put on it. So it's, what are the facts that we can say about this card that is called the 6 of Swords? Well, the first thing you can say is that there are 3 people in a small boat. And there's a man standing with a pole and 2 other people, one larger person cloaked, and then another smaller person. If you say, there's a man and then a woman and a child, then you're already putting a story on it, because we don't know that it's a woman or a child. We can imagine that, but still we don't have the full facts yet. So this is as much as we can say. Then we look at the directionality. And that's some of the reason we don't know who they are, because the people are facing away from the viewer, right? And they're also, there's the directionality of the direction they are moving in, to the right and presumably towards the land in the distance. So, of course, we look at the landscape. I don't know whether there are any old English majors here. One of the things we were taught was something called the objective correlative. That is, when you're reading a novel, and the novelist, or you're reading a poem and the poet is describing the landscape, it is often a reflection, or it is meant to give you a sense of the mood. If there are clouds in the sky, it's sort of there to, let you know that this is kind of a gloomy situation. So here we have in the landscape, and this is really looking at it closely, water on one side of the boat is choppy. On the other side, it is calm. In the distance, there's land, and there are trees. But in this deck, they're kind of gray. The color makes it indistinct, right? So we don't know a lot about the direction the people are headed in. So that's what you can say, free of story. These are just the facts. Oh, and of course, there are 6 swords standing upright in the boat, which is a pretty odd fact, but there it is. So then we go underneath the story. What are the symbols and what do they mean? Well, the first symbol is a boat, right? You can think about what does a boat mean in all different kinds of stories and movies and popular presentations. Boats are about transportation and transition from one state to another, from one land to another. Then we get to there's a boatman. So this is somebody who tells us, and in fact gives us the direction we're going in. That's the person who is holding the pole or turning the wheel on the ship. This is the captain, the person who's directing us. There's the water. There's the choppy water and the calm water. Choppy water can suggest, emotional turmoil, and calm water can suggest, being calm. There are swords and numbers. What do they mean? The number 6, if you are into numerology, there are meanings for that. And of course, in the tarot, we have all of these suits. This is the suit of swords, and that has some symbolism itself and some specific meanings. But one of the things I think is important to do before, figuring out what the tarot means by what a sword is, by thinking for yourself, what does a sword mean symbolically to me? There are trees and there's land. That is, trees are symbols, land, islands are symbols. There's a family unit. And now I'm going to actually say, saying that is already starting to put a story on things because we don't know that they're a family unit. But when you look at 3 people, and one of them looks like a man, and one of them looks possibly like a woman, and one is a child, we have sort of the original family unit, and it gets kind of biblical in some ways. And then, of course, once again, there's directionality. Which way are the people facing and going, and what does the direction mean? Right? And I want to also take a step back and also talk about the color, because here are 2 versions of this very same deck. One is the borderless Waite-Smith deck, and the other is the radiant Waite-Smith deck. The radiant one is on the left. You can see it's a little more colorful. And, one of the things that's interesting to me is that on the image on the right-hand side, because the land ahead is indistinct and kind of gray, we don't know yet whether this is going to be a happy place. Whereas on the left-hand side, it looks a little happier than on the right. So it suggests that we're moving to a better place. But, these are things, when you choose a deck, these are things which will affect the way you react to and see the cards. So then we're going to look at finding a story, not finding your story, but finding a story, because there are a lot of stories that are alive in here. But, we ask, so what's the overall mood or feeling you get from the image, the landscape, the body language, right? The people seated in the boat seem kind of huddled. And, one of the phrases that I think of when I look at this card and finding a story, is I think of the huddled masses, right? In the poem that sits at the base of the Statue of Liberty, where it speaks of the huddled masses yearning to be free. So sometimes I look at this card, and the story I put on it is I say, this is the card of the refugee. These are people who are escaping from one place that was dangerous to another place they hope will be safer, or one place where they had no opportunity and where they were poor, and to another place where they hope there is greater opportunity. So then we ask, who are the people in the card? And, if you've done a reading with me, you probably know that at some point or other, when we get to a card like this, not only do I ask, well, who's the protagonist? But before I even ask that, I ask, okay, there are three people in this card. Which one of them is you? Right? That's already projecting yourself into the story. So before we project you into the story, the question is, who's the protagonist? Is it the boatman? And this is, the tale of, the mythological boatman Charon, who ferried souls of the living across to the world of the dead. And this is Charon's story? Or is this the story of two souls, right? Or is it the story, of, one of those people in the boat? These are important distinctions. Once again, now we ask about finding a story. We're talking about directionality. What are they leaving behind? And where are they going? And how do they feel about it? And of course, the really odd question, why are there six swords standing up in a boat? Particularly because if there were six swords sticking up in a boat like that, of course, we know that there would be water leaking in and they'd be sinking in a minute. So we're talking about poetic imagery here. And the last and perhaps most important question is, what stories or myths, movies, TV shows, poems, songs does this image remind you of? I've already given you one example with the poem at the base of the Statue of Liberty. But, there are any number of stories. I can think about my family's story of escaping from Europe during the war, going from sort of the choppy water to the calm water. Now we get to, of course, finding your story. If this were the card you pulled this morning for your card of the day, what would its message to you be? Right? Does this speak to a question that you have or a situation in your life? Some people, when they pull a card a day, they don't have a question. The question is, what's the energy I should be aware of today? And the card may speak about a particular energy or a particular situation, and is what you put on it. It's the story you project onto the card. But of course, when we're getting to a 3-card spread, and we'll get to those fairly soon, you'll see how to take that situation and thread it through several cards. Who are you in the card? Once again, as I said, who's the protagonist? But if this is the card that comes up, who are you and who are the other people and what's your relationship? When I this card comes up in a reading and, I ask people, okay, who are you in the card? When somebody says, oh, I'm the huddled figure that looks like a woman, right? And they just might even say, I'm the woman in the boat. They don't even get into whether it is a woman or not. It's just, I'm the woman in the boat. And so one of the things that I is important to point out is the person in the boat, the people in the boat, they're passengers. And you may be familiar, and some of you may have even heard me talk about this advertising campaign. There's an advertising campaign for Volkswagen. And I love their slogan. The slogan is drivers wanted. Are you a passenger in your life or are you the driver? In this image, the boatman is the driver. And the boatman, because he's standing up, can see past the swords and can see the destination. Whereas the people who are seated in the boat, the swords are actually kind of in their line of vision. They can't really see where they're going. And that actually speaks to the symbolism of swords. One of the symbolic things that we can say about the swords is that they represent old ideas or prejudices that keep us from seeing reality as it is. and keep us from having a direct experience of what is exactly going on. And that the task of the people in this boat is, as they head towards the new place, is to pick up each sword and throw it overboard and free themselves from this old way of thinking, rather than going along with that cliched phrase, no matter, wherever you go, there you are. But you don't want to bring these swords with you. You want to throw them overboard. So what are we leaving behind, right? You have to ask, so what am I going away from? And that can be the situation you want to escape. Where are you going? How do you feel about it? In this image, because the land is indistinct, it may be, there may be this somber sense of, I'm leaving this thing behind, but I don't really know yet what the future holds. I can't see my way past the swords, and this land in the distance seems kind of gray. I'm just hoping things are going to be better. And, when we do this as a, card of the day kind of thing, it asks the question, what should you be contemplating today? What action should I consider taking? And, when I get a card like this, a question I will ask myself is, what are the ideas that are keeping me from seeing my way forward? And what do I need to do to, be more directive about where I want to go? So, of course, not all cards are as simple as the Six of Swords. A lot of the images, are very concrete day-to-day images in the minor arcana. And then we come to the major arcana, and you think, oh my goodness, this is, as I like to say, it's a bit of a dog's breakfast of symbols here. There are biblical symbols, right? You have the four creatures in the four corners of the card. They actually are representative of the four writers of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and which is why they have the books in front of them. But those Gospel writers are also associated, and they were connected to these creatures by the creatures in Ezekiel's vision of the wheels, which is now we're also dealing with biblical references. There are also Egyptian symbols here, right? There's the Sphinx. There's the Anubis. There are astrological glyphs. In the center of the wheel, you see the symbol for Aquarius, and various other signs and astrological symbols. And then, of course, there are Hebrew and Roman letters. In the wheel, it says, you can read it as Rota, or Tarot, or Torah, depending upon which way you read the letters. And of course, the Hebrew letters are the four letters Yod He Vav He of the unpronounceable name of the divine in Judaism. So there's an awful lot going on here. Then, of course, there is the title of the card, the Wheel of Fortune. So it's already telling you, in a way, what the card means. You don't have to go deep into all these symbols to know that the wheel turns, it goes up and it goes down. And sometimes it goes up and sometimes it goes down, and depending upon where the card is and whether it's right side up or upside down, that's how you'll read it. If it comes right side up, generally, it is read as things are going to get better. You're going to have good fortune. It's coming your way. Of course, that's predictive tarot. That's not generally how I read, but I'm giving you, this is what I'll call the book meanings of the card. When it is reversed, it is often read as, oh, well, things are going to go bad. The wheel is now going to take a turn for the worse. And so things are going to go downhill. But of course, the wheel keeps turning. So even if it's going down, it's going to go back up. And even if it's going up, it's going to go back down. This is part of the hidden wisdom of the card, that is impermanence. If things are going well, just know that to be grateful for it, and it will change, and vice versa. Speaking of reversals, because this is something that Lisa and I were speaking of a few minutes ago, um, different people read reversals differently. So uh, some people, when they see a card that is upside down, they ignore the fact that it's upside down and they read it exactly as if it were right side up. So they would say, "Oh, good fortune is coming your way," or "Things are going to change." And if it were upside down, they'd say, "Things were good, but things are going to go downhill," right? And that's the reversed way of reading it. And then the third way, which is generally how I read things, but not always, because I tend to be a little more fluid in the way I approach things, is that if it's reversed, it just means that the positive energy of the card is being blocked for some reason that you can remove the block from. So if this were reversed, it would say, well, that it looks like bad things can happen, but it doesn't mean that that's, definite. You can actually change that. And another way to talk about it is, it's the roulette wheel. It's the gamble of life. You don't know where the ball is going to fall, right? So, it doesn't have to be so complicated. And as I say, I look to things like roulette wheels as a way of thinking about this, because a roulette wheel is indeed a wheel of fortune. Uh, and that's not, this is without even looking at the number of the card, 10, the clouds and what they might mean, the sky, and of course, there's the title of the card. But I honestly think, even the really complex cards are simpler than you might think. Oftentimes things will come to you. When I look at this card, I think about the Joni Mitchell song, The Circle Game. The seasons go round and round, things go up and down. We can't look ahead. We can only see where we've gone, and we're just going to keep going round and round. And so one of the things that I like to talk about, though, is the hidden wisdom of this card. And this is something that you'll learn, if you really decide that you want to go deep into the teachings of the cards. Oftentimes I'll say to a client when this card comes up is, are you living on the circumference of the wheel, the edge, or are you in the center of the wheel? Because if you're on the circumference, you're just going to keep going around and around and around. But if you're living in the center, if you are centered in your life, everything will just go on around you, and you will not be touched by it, so that you are being thrown up and feeling ecstasy because things have gone well, and then things go down and you are feeling miserable. The goal is to be able to remain equanimous, to keep your equanimity even as everything changes around you all the time. So you're not reacting in any extreme. And that you're able to actually deal with changes in a healthy way and see things clearly. So, what happens when the same card shows up and you're choosing a different deck? Because different decks tell different stories. This is the same card from 4 different decks. It's the Emperor on the far left from the Waite-Smith deck, and he's kind of a severe-looking guy. It's not my favorite version of the card, but I love the Waite-Smith deck, and there are good things about the Emperor. I often actually refer to the Emperor in this other deck, which is the St. Croix deck. Here you see a Roman emperor holding architectural plans in front of an aqueduct and all of the people of Rome. This shows the emperor as a visionary, someone who knows what the people need, knows how to organize the resources for the good of their civilization. It means, of course, being able to, use power judiciously. Because, of course, not all Roman emperors were that good. But this is a very positive version of the card, as opposed to the emperor in Rachel Pollack's version of the deck, what is the name of the deck? The Secret of the Garden of Eden, I think it is. It's out of print, unfortunately. But here you see Moses with Pharaoh. And here, this is, Pharaoh as emperor. This is somebody who's, being told, let my people go. And he says, I don't think so. He's just, and as it says in the Bible, Pharaoh hardened his heart 10 times. So this is a leader who is just not listening. And then last, an image from a deck that I like to take to parties because it's a little more silly in some ways, and at the same time deeply revealing. This is the Emperor, and you see a bottle of pills that says egotism, right? 500 milligrams, because if you're going to be an emperor, you got to have one hell of an ego. And the images in this deck are all kind of a collage sort of thing. Then, as I say, different systems of interpretation approach the same card differently. On the right, you see the Ten of Wands in the Waite-Smith deck. And on the left, you see the Ten of Wands in the alchemical deck of Robert Place. Now, both of them share one thing, and that is that cards that are numbered 10 are about the end of a cycle and coming to the beginning of a new cycle. In the Ten of Wands in the Waite-Smith deck, you can see this figure is coming to the end of their journey, the town, but they're weighted down by everything they're carrying, and they can't even see that they're at the end of near the end of their journey because their head is bowed down from carrying all this weight. And you see, I'm describing the physical nature of what's happening in the card as a way of understanding the meaning. This comes up for somebody and it's like, you're coming to the end of this thing and you're really weighed down by it, and you can't see that you're near the end, but you're getting there. So take heart. Whereas in the left-hand version, what we have is the phoenix rising out of the flames from the 10 wands. So this is the rebirth at the end of the cycle of the 10 wands and the start of a new cycle, a fiery cycle. And that's one of the things that I love about comparing images from different decks as a way of understanding the meaning in different ways. It helps you deepen your understanding. It's a little bit of perhaps a monomaniacal collecting sickness to have the 30 decks that I have. But, I know people who have 300, so it's not so bad. But still, as I say, you can look at lots of images as a way of really sort of having these cards converse with each other so that you come away with different understandings of the meaning of the deck that you happen to be using. Choosing which deck to work with is a very personal decision. For example, on the left here, you see the Discovering Beauty deck by an artist named Sophia Litvak. It's a beautiful deck, and it focuses very much on the divine feminine. There are a lot of decks which focus in one way or another to explore the divine feminine. I have a number of those, but of course, as you might imagine, one of my favorite decks is the only one of its kind. It's called the Tarot of the Divine Masculine, because there are very few decks sort of explore that. And really, it explores the masculine from its most feminine to its most toxically masculine, right? And the whole range. And that to me is something worthy of exploration, at least for me personally. The next image you see is the King of Pentacles from the deck that was created by Salvador Dali. And you can actually see Dali in the image. He's seated as the king himself. And there are lots of images from his own artwork. The next image is from the Starman tarot deck. And this is the tarot deck that is inspired by the work of David Bowie. And that is David Bowie right there in the deck, and he's in most of the images in one way or another. And you may note that above his head are the images, or the spherote from the Tree of Life, because Bowie was deeply into Kabbalah, and so that image and other sort of Kabbalistic images show up throughout this deck as well. And the last image here is the Shining Flame, which sort of corresponds to, in the Waite-Smith deck, to the Knight of Wands. And this is the Spirit Keepers tarot created by Venable Wen. And most of its imagery comes from East Asian cultures, not exclusively. You know, sometimes I refer to the Waite-Smith tarot as the warehouse of Western symbolism. You know, when we looked at the Wheel of Fortune, you know, as I said, there were biblical images, there were Egyptian images, there were astrological images. It is everything just smushed in there. You know, with Venable Wen's deck, the Spirit Keepers Tarot, we have a warehouse of Eastern imagery. So that you'll notice in the lower left-hand corner, there's one half of a hexagram. And that is also part of the way when you start putting cards together in her deck for a reading, you will find different hexagram readings within that deck. So I always recommend starting with the Waite-Smith deck because it really is connected to the culture that most of us grew up with. But of course, there are dozens of varieties of the Waite-Smith deck. I like the borderless image a lot. In the center, you see the wiser version of this deck. And one of the things that people gravitate to that version is because it is multiracial, showing people from different cultures or different color skin in all of the images, but the images are the same. So it is a kind of a halfway step to what I would call a multicultural deck. And then, of course, there's the Radiant Rider-Waite Tarot, which is the very colorful version, which I love for other reasons. All of the deck that I use is called the Universal Waite deck, which is a little less bright than the Radiant deck, and a little more colorful than the borderless edition. So it's kind of the halfway point. So why do I choose the Waite-Smith deck? Of course, because of the storytelling ability of it. You know, all these images help tell a story. But there's something else about the Waite-Smith deck that I love. Ambiguity, right? So there's this test that a lot of psychiatrists use. I'm sure you're all familiar with a test called the Rorschach test, the ink blot test, you know, where they hold up an image of an ink blot and they say, what do you see in here? And you project various situations and they determine your psychological state based on that. But they also have something called the thematic apperception test. And this is one image from that test. And so they'll show you an image like this and they'll say to you, okay, just as I ask some people when I show a tarot card, what's going on in this image? Well, some people might look at it and think, this is somebody who is about to jump out of a window, right? And someone else might say, this is someone in a dark room who's thrown open the window and is looking at the light and really wants more light in their life. So in both of those, you know, responses, someone is telling a story that is coming from within them. And that's what happens and what we can do with tarot. So, for example, as I say, you know, the ambiguous nature enables someone to project their own feeling and find personal meaning in the card. This is the Seven of Pentacles. And when people look at this card, you know, they can say, you know, what's the feeling of this person? Is he tired? Is he taking a moment to rest because he's tired from all his hard work? Is he looking at what he's done and feeling good about it and contemplating what he's going to do with all this, the harvest? Or is he looking down at it and thinking, is this all I've gotten for all the work I've done? And, you know, how you respond to the image tells us really, you know, your relationship to the situation you're in and where you are going. But of course, you know, as I often say, you got to look at all the details. And it's important to point out that he is digging in the dirt. So he's breaking up the dirt with a hoe so that the roots can grow deeper and wider. And this is also, part of the symbolism, because if you want to sort of grow deeper and grow stronger and taller, you need to dig deep into the roots of who you are. So, learning to see a card is learning to see on a bunch of levels. What I ask you to do when you work with a card is don't look up the meaning right off the top of the bat. Look at all the images in the card without interpreting, including the colors. What's the mood? What is your emotional response and why? What are the main symbols and what do they mean to you and in the culture you come from? Is there a story or association they evoke for you? After you've done that, journal your own meaning for the card. And then, only then, look up the traditional meanings. When you've done that, you can compare the traditional meaning to your own interpretation and see where things overlap and where things are different. Because as I say, there's no necessarily right or wrong way to interpret a card, because a card meaning shifts and changes depending upon the question being asked, its position in a spread, whether it's upside down or right side up, and its relationship to other cards. Some of those relationships might be, if we were looking a moment ago at the Seven of Pentacles, if you have a spread, and if you have a 3-card spread, and just by chance, all 3 cards are numbered 7, well, there's importance in the number 7 and what the number 7 means. So that also has an important way of considering the meaning of all the cards together. So let's talk about systems of interpretation, because what I've been talking about so far is doing it yourself. But then, of course, there are systems that people use. Here we are looking at the astrological wheel, and one of the ways that people use astrology is they line up the cards, both the major arcana and the minor arcana cards, to the various degrees around the wheel of the heavens. And so you can see how some cards are connected to specific positions in the horoscope. So that, one of the things that I know is that in this system, my birth card is the Hermit, and that's supposed to have meaning for me in a particular way. Other ways of looking at things are alchemical, numerological, Kabbalistic, or Jungian. There are more than this. I tend to go with the Kabbalistic and the Jungian. That's my orientation. I find the astrological connections way too complicated for me, and I'm just not as interested. I go with what I'm called to. And so, as I say, there's no one right or wrong way to do this. Go with what calls you. If you're called to study the astrological correspondences, that's your way in. My way is Kabbalah. And, this, you're not going to be able to read all of this from this slide. I'm not going to go into detail except to say that we use this glyph called the Tree of Life. And you'll notice, you'll see that glyph on the left-hand side. And it notes that, the positions on the Tree of Life are connected to the Sphirot, which think of it as like the chakra system, the Jewish mystical version of the chakra system. And all of these energies are connected to concepts, and they're connected to cards. You'll also notice that there are pathways between these positions. There are, in fact, 22 of them, corresponding to the 22 major arcana cards. We won't get into any of that. It gets pretty complicated, but it's the way I love to do things. I do want to take you a little bit into Kabbalistic interpretation. A minute ago, we were looking at the Seven of Pentacles. This is the Seven of Wands. All of the cards that are numbered 7 in the minor arcana are connected to the seventh sphira on the Tree of Life, which is called Netzach. Netzach means victory. And there are all these keywords and concepts which are connected to Netzach, victory being one of them, mission, endurance, ambition, fortitude, courage, persistence, commitment, resolve. And when you look at this card, you can easily see that, those concepts are being illustrated by that card. Here is somebody standing up. They're focused, they're tenacious, they're committed to standing up for themselves against all these other, what we can decide are 6 other people standing against him. But of course, once again, if we go back to just the facts, we don't actually see the 6 other people. So this is somebody who could be standing up and defending himself against a group of other people, where this could be somebody who's standing up and feeling defensive, and there are these 6 other wands just sticking up out of the ground, and this is somebody who is just what I sometimes call an argument waiting to happen. So is it a positive reading or a negative? From the Hasidic point of view, Netzach is also about the ego spectrum, about establishing a healthy ego and sense of self. And sometimes people see that as the ability to define themselves and defend themselves against others. And one of the things that we talk about with this card, going back to the details and the facts, I often ask someone in a reading, do you notice anything unusual about this figure standing there with the wand? And sometimes people see it and say what they see, and sometimes people say, well, I don't know what's going on. And then I will point out that he is wearing 1 shoe and 1 boot. This is somebody who, like Albert Einstein, when he got up in the morning and went into his office at Princeton, didn't pay attention to whether his shoes or socks matched, whether the color of his jacket matched his tie, or anything like that. He just didn't care. That wasn't important to him. What was important to him were other things. And so he didn't care what people thought. And you can say that this is somebody who doesn't care what other people think or how they judge him. He is standing up for himself and the way he feels and the way he wants to do things. So the other thing about cards, all the cards numbered 7 are Netzach cards. So these key words work for all of them, except for the fact that the cards can show either the positive or negative expression of that sephirotic energy. So when we look at the 7 of Cups, and we think about focused energy, this is somebody who can't focus. They can't decide what they want. And without the ability to focus, they can't make a commitment, and they can't, achieve their goal. We've talked a little bit about the 7 of Pentacles. Then there's the 7 of Swords. And here we see somebody, I sometimes like to refer to this as the Bugs Bunny card. This is like Bugs stealing Elmer Fudd's carrots. And that's a little more, what is the word, positive or humorous way of looking at the image. But in fact, if you think of this as somebody who decided to sign up and be a soldier as part of that camp, and now he's decided to be a deserter. He made a commitment and is now saying, I'm out of here. And so this is somebody who can't commit, who can't persevere, who doesn't have the courage or the willpower to face the difficulties. And one of the sentences that I like to give for, all Netzach cards is the sentence, when you can channel Netzach energy with intention and commitment, you can focus on your mission to persevere and in the face of difficulties, achieve victory. All right. So that is the overall concept of all the cards numbered 7. And the images can tell you, is this person able to persevere or not? So with that, let's get to the three-card spread. It's perhaps the most versatile tarot spread because it can be whatever you make it. The kind of question you ask can determine the meaning of the various positions. So that, as I say, there are hundreds of variations. So how do you know what to choose? Once again, it depends on what question you want to ask and the why of the reading. But, a lot of things sort of start out linear and temporal as Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So you could see this as, my heart is broken, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to a better place, right? So here are different categories. And this will be in a handout. Elise will, I believe, put this in the chat. So you'll have some of these slides. You don't have to take a lot of notes. I want you to be able to hear. So a temporal reading is like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. It's past, present, future. It's how do your past influences influence the present and the future outlook. And, I don't like to read the third position as future. Generally, I read it as possible outcome. I don't do I don't do predictive tarot. And I don't claim to be psychic in any way. I just say that, based on these trends, this is a possible outcome. But, none of these things are written in stone. And the information that you're getting from the cards that you see before the future can, in fact, give you the information that help you avoid or move towards a particular future that you want. Because really, the tarot is not here to steal your agency. It's not here to take choice away from you. It's here to help you see things more clearly so you can make a better and more informed choice. The second, speaking of which, is action-oriented. What's the problem? What is the solution? And what is the outcome? This is about finding actionable advice for very specific challenges. Then there is a more self-reflective way to read a three-card spread, so that you're looking at it as card 1 is mind, card 2 is body, card 3 is soul. And you're looking at the question from 3 different levels. What do I think about this? How do I feel in my body about this? So I may have an idea about, like I want to go somewhere. That's my thought. And then my body gets all tense, right? So that it maybe my mind tells me I want to go there, but my body is saying no. And then you sort of tune in and, your third card is this is your soul's information, what you need to know. So this is about checking your internal alignment and spiritual health. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because it doesn't mean necessarily that you should separate the temporal and the self-reflective. You can look at both things at the same time, so that you could say, well, reading it on this level, here's how I see things. And reading it on that level, it takes me in a little bit of a different direction, or it reinforces what I can see in the temporal level. Then there's decision making. I'm not a big fan of this, but I often have clients who tell me, gee, I got a job here and I want to live there. Where do I go? What do I do? So there's option 1, option 2, and how to choose. 2 paths and what the deciding factor is. And of course, one of the biggest categories that people come with questions about are relationships. So oftentimes, in a 3-card spread, there's you, the other person, and the dynamic in the relationship that needs to be explored. So let's look at a sample question and the positions. Here's a sample question. I'm unhappy in my current job. What should my next step be? And so here we're looking at current energy action to take, and potential outcome. Is there anyone who would like to take a crack at interpreting this? Whether you are an experienced tarot reader or have never read a tarot card before. And I'd love actually to hear from someone who doesn't read and doesn't use the cards. Elise, can you see everybody, whether anyone's raising their hand or
I think I can see everyone, but I think people are probably feeling
don't be
shy.
shy. Don't be scared. Don't be embarrassed. Because as I say, there's no wrong answer. It's how you interpret it.
I do have a question from the chat for you.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so Vera was wondering how to avoid falling into confirmation bias. So how do
Ah,
you, yeah,
all right. I'm going to put that aside for a moment and we will come back to it. Don't let me forget it.
okay.
All right.
Oh,
So,
oh, oh,
Kristen,
we have some,
and Joy, you've got a couple of volunteers here.
okay. I don't know who did it first. I'm gonna
Joy can
go,
go ahead.
Joy. Okay, Joy, take it away.
Okay. Yeah, this is just so fascinating first. Thank you for doing this whole thing. I have a little experience reading tarot, but I can empty my mind of what I think I know. I enough, I think. So on the Eight of Cups, the current energy is kind of want to leave because I'm unhappy. And I would take that as saying, okay, if you leave, then let's look at the Three of Wands. You've got a lot of options. Look at all that. There's ships going by, and just look at it. See what appeals to you. And then the action, assuming you stop looking and do something, you're going to have a real adventure from this. You're going to be getting into something that you can't really know how it's going to unfold, but you'll probably be glad that you did it. That's how I would see that.
Excellent. Excellent. Anyone else want to take a crack at it? Can be the same, can be different. You can see things in it that you want to add or change. Kristen?
Kristen.
Yeah, I have no, I know nothing about cards. So just to give you a heads up, I might need a lot of correction. But, I see the first current energy is similar to Joy, like somebody is walking away. But I do see these things in the front here. They look like trophies or gold or something that there's a lot of maybe material stuff. I don't know if I'm translating that right, but regardless, walking away from it, not interested in it. So could be walking away from a lot of abundance of some kind, but is still not fulfilled, ready for another journey or wanting to go on another journey or needing to go on another journey. So that's the current energy. The action to take. Um, to me, the person standing is very contemplative, is hesitant, maybe not leaning forward, not moving. There's a long distance too, because I see mountains away. Um, so there's a lot of flat ground, maybe a lot of traveling to go before they get to a realization. And then the potential outcome, I look at the Fool. And now I have seen this card before. In fact, Mark, I got this card in my spread when I worked with you. Um, you know, has a lot of faith. Um, is on the ledge. Maybe I mean this the character seems very like free flowing and like maybe fun and like ready to go off the cliff and is okay with jumping off the cliff because they have the faith that they'll end up on their feet somehow or another, even though they may not know how that is. And I think that's all I have. So
That's great.
I know how that is.
All right, we'll take one more if there's one more who wants to speak. Well, if not, one thing I want to say is both of you were really spot on. Something that it was just said about the current energy, the walking away from what was described as trophies, right? That's one of the great things about the cards. You look at the images of those cups and what do they mean to you? And, it was said, well, this is, maybe material abundance, and someone is walking away because it's just not satisfying. And in fact, that is the book meaning of this card. Someone who is walking away from a success, but success that is, and this is an interesting way of looking at it. When you look at the 8 cups, look at how they are arrayed. They're, 5 across the bottom, 3 across the top with a space between them. So it looks like there's space for another cup. It's like there's something missing, right? So this person is going off in search of what is missing from their current situation. And another thing I want to point out in terms of sort of finding the thread, the person in the first image looks like they're headed into the mountains, right? They're heading away and upwards. The person in the second image is at the top of a mountain looking out over a landscape, and you see a golden sea, so the sun is rising, and there are 3 boats on the sea, just as there are 3 wands. So there are choices. And then we have the fool, who is about to step off the cliff, who's making the choice. And one of the things about the fool, that I always like to bring up is the story of the roadrunner who can step off a cliff and keep going and doesn't fall because, like the fool, he believes he's held up. He has faith in his choice and his abilities, as opposed to the coyote who, when he gets about halfway across, realizes, whoops, there's nothing here, and down he goes. So, this is a fairly positive reading, saying, oh, yeah, you should leave the job. But here's the other thing. It's the Kabbalistic overlay. One of the things about cards numbered 3 is they're about strategy and planning. The third sphera includes the energy of strategy and planning. So when you look at this person, it's like, well, they see the choices, but they're really thinking them through before they take the next step. But even when you do take all that strategizing and really think things through, you can never really know, once you've made the choice, what's going to happen. You have to have faith and just take that next step. And so that's, I think, a good way to look at this 3-card spread. Here's yet another one. Same sort of question, but different cards. I don't feel like my job is aligned with my deepest spiritual goals. What should I do? Anybody want to take a crack at this? If not, it's okay. I'll take you through some of the things that I see. One of the things I will point out, and I mentioned this a little earlier, this is a 3-card spread with 2 cards that are numbered 8. Now, once again, different systems approach things differently, but Kabbalistically, the cards numbered 8 are connected to the sphera of Hod. But before I go into a little more, I see Vera has her hand up.
Yeah,
Would you
do
like
it.
to give us your interpretation?
Yes, hello. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to try. So mine says that a person has to keep working hard, and there is a lot to do. Just be very disciplined. But on the body level, body feels very uncomfortable, and intuition says that it is not what I'm supposed to do. I can keep on going, but it is not something that is healthy for me. And the spirit suggests that we need to look at the situation from a different perspective, or probably to align with mind and keep on working. And this hard work will lead to some insights. And finally, body will also join the positive feeling about this work.
Beautiful. Great, great way of looking at it. And you approached it mind, body, spirit, which is terrific. So when I come to this, my interpretation is not so very different from where you are. But of course, I have that Kabbalistic overlay. Cards numbered 8 are connected to the Sphira of Hod, and one of the concepts around Hod is surrender. And another concept connected to it is appreciation and gratitude. So when I look at the mind card and I see this figure working away at something, this is somebody who has surrendered to the job. They're just going to keep doing it and focus on it, regardless of how they might feel. But in their body, there's a way in which they feel trapped or bound. All right. But this is also, once again, this is a swords card. And, we can look at it and say if somebody feels trapped, or they feel physically uncomfortable where they are. But one of the things about this card is that, the figure you see is bound and blindfolded, and there are swords around them, like the Six of Swords. Swords represent ideas. And in this card, these can be ideas that are keeping somebody prisoner. Because the reality is, when you look, and this is one of the reasons why I tell people, really look at the body language and put yourself in the position of the person in the card for a minute. Think if you were that person in that card, if you shimmied a little, those bindings look loose enough that they would fall. You're not tightly bound. And then you could lift the blindfold from the eyes and notice that one is not completely surrounded by these swords. You could just walk away. So that really, this is the way in which the mind or certain ideas are keeping somebody prisoner. So the body and the mind are a little bit at war about this situation. Right? That, you may feel like you think you've got to push your way through it, and your body is saying, I feel trapped. And then we get to the Hanged Man. And the Hanged Man, one of the lovely things about this card, I think it was, it was Vera, I think the name was, talked about seeing things from a different perspective. And that's one of the things about the Hanged Man. He sees everything. He's upside down. So it's like he's turned everything upside down, and he sees things in a way that nobody else sees things, and gives him a point of view that helps him feel better about things, perhaps. But the other thing about the hangman, it also connects to one of the words for Hod, which is surrender. And there's a phrase from the 12-step tradition that I associate with the hanged man, and that is let go and let God. So that's why you see the halo around the head of the hanged man. He's not fighting the fact that he's hung upside down. And in fact, if you were to turn the card upside down from what it looks like right now, it would look like he's dancing a jig. He's not struggling. He's surrendered to the situation and is at one with it, so that it is a spiritual lesson. So, the answer to this question could very well be, well, I may not feel like this job is aligned with my deepest spiritual goals, but maybe I'm not seeing it right. Maybe there's a deeper level that I need to surrender to, and a deeper lesson that I need to learn before I decide that I should leave. And so it's asking the querent here to see their job from another point of view and set themselves free from some of the ways they think this job is binding them. Okay, making a choice. We can't decide whether to live in New York or Los Angeles. What's the best decision? Option A is New York. Option B is Los Angeles. And the deciding factor is in the middle. We have the 6 of Wands, the 9 of Pentacles, and the 10 of Pentacles in the middle. Anybody want to take a crack at this? Oh, I'll give you my reading. Oh, Joy, go ahead.
Since nobody else said, I don't want to.
I'm glad you have the courage. Go ahead.
Okay, so in New York, you're going to have a lot of people to work with, and you're going to be the leader. And it looks mostly like they're pretty happy with you, bouncing their wands up and down. Yes, go. We like what you're doing. When you go to LA, you're going to be more isolated, but your environment is not going to be unpleasant. It's just going to be more solitary. So the deciding factor might be, do you want to be with a lot of other people, or do you want to be by yourself? And the 10 of Pentacles clearly shows lots of people. So that might be guiding me towards choosing New York in this case.
That's very much how I would read this. The additional factor that I would add in to the central image, the 10 of Pentacles, because it shows an older man and 2 people who could be parents and then a child. We're looking at 3 generations. So one of the ways and one of the questions actually to turn back at the querent, and one of the things that I tell people is that cards don't only answer questions, they ask them. The deciding factor here is, where is your family? Do you have more family in Los Angeles or New York? Because that may be the deciding factor for you. Do you want to be with them, or are you trying to get away from them? But this, when I look at this as a whole, I think if you go with New York, you're going to be in a leadership position and popular, and you're going to be closer to family, and you're going to make a lot of money. Whereas in Los Angeles, you'll have a nice life, but you're going to be alone. What do you want? That's how you make the choice. Now, is that really the right answer for somebody? I never do this kind of reading. Not my favorite thing to do, but a lot of people do it, and it works for a lot of people. So, what's your choice? I can't decide what tarot book to get. What's the best decision? So here are my recommendations. The book on the left is the Numinous Tarot Guide, a new way to read the cards, and it's by a woman named Rashunda Tramble. She is really great. And if you are just starting out, each card has each card is 3 pages, and it gives you a very concrete situation that the card can apply to. It talks about the traditional interpretations of the card, and it gives you some questions to ask yourself about your meanings for the card. So it's really simple, really fast, and it is a really deep introduction that is not overwhelming. Then there's Tarot for Yourself by Mary K. Greer, a classic. And this is it's in many ways, it's a workbook for your own inner journey. So while it will give you a lot of the information that you'll find in the Numinous Tarot Guide, it is also going to give you a lot of exercises. This is a book with a lot of pages with lines on it for you to write in, because you will be doing work with this card as a way of finding your personal meanings for every card, along with the traditional meanings and ways to sort of find a bridge between them. And last is 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack, which is mostly text, is a really deep dive into the symbolism and meaning across history for all of the cards, And it is, once again, as all of these three are, the subtitle for each of them is Know Yourself, Inward Journey, Self Awareness. And that's because that's pretty much my orientation towards the cards. My feeling is that, you don't use cards to tell the future. You use the cards to see the present and yourself more clearly, so you're better able to make a choice that is informed for your future. As I say, if you don't know anything, go with the first book. If you know some more, either of these other two, and both are great. I use both of them. I love them both. They're classics. Of course, there's my book. We'll come to that in a minute, but I don't recommend it for beginners. And with that, it's time for Q&A. So anybody have any questions? Oh, there was the confirmation bias question. So that's one of the reasons why I don't read for myself. I always go to another reader because I'm always going to try and see what I want it to be. But because I also know that, I push myself to say, okay, so I know what I want this to be. What is this card? What are these cards telling me? And I'll give you, the honest thing that happened to me back in 2013 when I met the man who was my last boyfriend. And all my alarm bells were going off. Like, this is not going to be good. But I did a tarot reading anyway. And the tarot reading confirmed everything I thought, that this was going to be an utter and complete disaster. And it was. Because I said, okay, well, that's what the cards say, but cards are cards. You don't know that that's actually going to be what happens, even though all my alarm bells were ringing and the cards defined that. And that's what it was. And when it ended and, he moved out, I said, well, okay, I knew this was coming and I recognized the signs, and I can't even blame him for a lot of it because I knew and I made the choice. So I think that answers that question.
There's a question. This is an interesting question. What are your thoughts on using an AI or chatbot to help use the cards without confirmation bias?
Well, so first, cards on the table, as it were. I use AI. I think it is very useful for research, although one of the things that I have learned in doing research with AI is that you must triple check it because, as you probably heard, AI can hallucinate things and tell you things that are completely wrong. So it's important to double check. But the reason I don't like using AI or a chatbot to read or interpret the cards is because as I say, if you're reading for yourself, go ahead, use the AI. But it's always good to work with another person because that person will look at a card and say, just as I often do, when I see this card, I feel like it's asking you this question. Because, as I say, cards don't only answer questions, they ask them. And those questions can be pointed and help you come to the decision that you need to make from really that back and forth. While I've been yammering away on this presentation, my readings are much more collaborative, that there's back and forth. I'm asking questions and I'm inviting participation. Because a tarot reading is not just somebody reading the cards to you. It is inviting you in so that you can sort of help find the answer for yourself because it's within you. So a chatbot, okay, but it will give you what I think will be, it can give you a deep answer, but it won't necessarily take you to the depths of yourself.
Okay, here's another question. What are your thoughts around the tarot used as a tool of divination does the sitter draw the cards that are meant for them?
Well, I often say to people, I don't know how it works. I just know that it works. And is it the card that's meant for you? So sometimes, you'll pull a card and you'll think, I have no idea what this means. I don't get it. And that's because you can't see things yet. Things aren't clear to you. And then later on, you'll say, oh, now I know what that card meant. A little too late, but then you understand. And sometimes, like you'll get what some people call, I don't like this word for it, the stalker card. I think of it as, the insistent knocking at the door card. One time, I think it was 2 years ago, you remember that Eight of Pentacles card with the farmer and the, digging with the hoe. For the first 3 months of 2024, I must have gotten that card about 12 times in 3 months, sometimes 3 days in a row, just, doing the card a day practice. And when that happens, that is a message from the universe knocking at the door saying, I have a message for you and you're not getting it. And I know lots of ways to interpret that card. So each day I would interpret it a different way, and then it would show up again. And I'd say, okay, the way I'm thinking about it isn't right yet. And it took me 3 months to get to the depth of what that card was trying to tell me at that time. And when it happened, it was like, oh, duh. How did I not see that? And when that happened, it stopped showing up. So, you ask, is the card meant for you? I believe so. I can't give you any rational reason. It's just what I believe, and it is what my experience has proven.
And then a question about mixing cards from multiple decks, and is that blasphemous?
Okay, so sometimes for study, not for reading, but for study, because you saw that I put out all those different emperor cards. I will sometimes do a spread and then go to another deck that I like and pull the same cards and put them in the same spread next to the first spread and compare the energies and what comes to me from it as a way of learning to deepen my relationship with the cards and their meanings. Sometimes I will actually take a deck that I really don't like, and I have a couple of them, decks that I look at them and I think this really creeps me out. But I feel that I need to sort of sometimes put those cards down as a way of getting to an understanding of this spread from a different angle. And that, I think, is a good way to use different decks. I would never mix decks in the same reading. At least you're yeah.
Muted. Sorry.
Yeah.
And you guys feel free to raise your hands. I'm happy to read questions too. Is there such a thing as being too specific or too broad in the questions I ask? I guess I'm asking if there's also a practice or training in asking the questions. Excellent question. How do you ask a good question?
So one of the things I in my facts page on my site, which I always direct people to if they're coming to a reading, is to, how to ask a good question. Because sometimes people come to me and they ask a question and it is a yes/no question. And that closes off your ability to explore lots of things that are going on in a situation. So I look for open-ended questions. But it could be, like, what do I need to know about my relationship so that it can work for the best for both of us, right? And so that has an end goal in mind, but is also about a process, Now, the reading might reveal that what you need to know is that the thing that is good for the both of you is to actually separate because you're so different, so that the relationship will not be a marriage, for example. But it can help you understand the process of the situation. And I think that's always a good way to think about a question, which is, what is the process I need to get through in order to understand the direction I'm going and what's the best outcome? That's a good way, I think, to handle things. But as you see, I presented for the 3 card spreads, which it's not part of my practice. It's not what I do with people unless I'm reading at a party and I'm doing quick little hits for people. My practice is to do a 10-card tree of life spread, which I sometimes, describe as an MRI for your soul. It really takes you to the depth of where you're going and what's going on.
Are there any unilaterally terrible cards?
No. So I was reading at a party the other night.
Okay.
And the woman who hired me, said before I started reading for her guests, I'm really afraid of the death card. And I just hate it. And I sat down with her before we did any of it, and I explained that 98% of the time the death card does not mean death. It can, and I've actually had a couple of readings where it did, but most of the time it just means really extraordinary and difficult transformation. For example, the metaphor that I use is the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. Right? For all intents and purposes, the caterpillar is dead once the butterfly is there, right? And it is a transformation from something a little more on the ground to something that can fly. But in the cocoon, which is the time of the transformation, the caterpillar's body completely dissolves. It's like being in a pressure cooker. It's not fun. It is like a death of the ego in many ways to have that kind of transformation. So it can be hard, but it is for the better, right? So it's about something that needs to die and transform. Another card like that is the 10 of Swords. People look at it and they see this figure lying on the ground with 10 swords in the back and thinking, oh my God, this is Julius Caesar, right? There it is. Yeah. And one of the things I like to point out about this card is, first, the sun is rising in the distance, right? So it's a new day. Something is dead that needed to die. And remember, one of the things about swords is swords are ideas and thoughts and preconceptions and prejudices that are holding you back. So, with these 10 swords, you have killed off something that needed to die, and you are free of these things. Sometimes I call this the zombie neurosis card. Why? Because if you've been in therapy and all of a sudden you had an insight about some neurotic behavior that was part of your life, you think, I see it now, I'm free. Well, it doesn't work that way, as you probably know. You've seen it and you think you're free, and then the next time you're in a little trouble, that old neurotic behavior comes back. Therapy teaches that you have to see it again and again and again until it finally loosens its hold on you and you've killed it. The way it took Rasputin 5 times of being attacked to finally die. It's 5 times, 10 times that you've got to kill this neurosis before it's gone. And even then, a really terrible crisis can roar it back to life. So I call it the zombie neurosis card. You've killed something that needed to go. And once again, Kabbalistically, 10 cards are about the end of a cycle. So something bad that has been in your life is now over. And the sun is rising and things will be better. But you're in that transition period where it doesn't feel great yet, but you can see it's going to be better. So, as you can see, it is not definitely a bad card. But let's say all the cards around it are difficult cards. let's say death is next to it, and the tower is next to it, and the five of pentacles are in that reading, and you have all these cards and you look at them and you think, oh, this is not good. Well, then it's not good. No getting around it. So really, I say you have to look at everything as a whole and find the thread through all the cards, because you don't read any one card when you're reading a spread in isolation. It's like a sentence with a subject, verb, and object.
Got it.
I know we're coming to the end. How many more questions do we have? I don't want to hold people past time, but
We got to the end of the question. So, oh wait, one more. So she got the devil. This is Vera again. She said, may I share please about my situation with the terrible card. It's been 2 years since the devil showed up in the position university in my 3-card spread. I keep persuading myself that it's the lesson that I have to learn, and that another card nearby represents my willingness to escape doing hard work. Second position was for art way. Does that make sense?
second position was what?
For art way? Oh, university art, maybe? I don't know if Vera is here.
Yes, I'm sorry if I may explain. Take another minute to explain. Yes, I am struggling all the time in between my university studies and my inclination to do art or to develop myself outside of the institution. And the devil keeps showing up in the spread for position for university, and sometimes I make also spread to understand why I feel so bad. And again, I see the devil, and I thought probably it already has changed for 2 years, and I made another spread to prepare for our workshop today. And again, I saw the devil in the position for university. I signed for university.
So one of the things that I like to point out in the Western tradition, the devil is the father of lies. So, and when you look at the card, you see that there are two figures standing before the devil with chains around their neck. And those chains are actually so loose that those people could literally lift those chains up, take them up, and walk away. So, as I say, the cards also ask questions. So, the question that I ask with the devil is, what lie have you been told or were you taught that you believe that is keeping you chained, right? So that lie could be that, a university education is essential. It might not be, right? That could be the lie. It could be a different thing. It's, what is it that you were taught or that you believe about the situation that is keeping you chained? It could be, in fact, that it's not a bad situation, but there's something that you believe about it that makes the experience bad for you. So it really requires looking at, the situation in a lot of ways to understand its meaning for you before you interpret it as, oh, this is terrible, right? So,
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to just point out again, so I have this book. It's not for everyone because it is it's not about teaching you how to, the meanings for all of the cards. It's teaching a 49-day, what I'll call meditative practice that is designed to help sort of clear the blockages inside of you. And it is based on a Kabbalistic ritual. Traditionally, this ritual takes place every year. This year it takes place between April 2nd and May 21st. But people do this ritual with this book anytime. If you want to look at it on Amazon and read what people have to say when they do it, I think you'll really find a great deal of a sort of encouragement for you to do this yourself if you're willing to sort of do that deep work. And of course, you can see all of my contact information here, which you'll have in the handout. Something that I want to offer people, if you already have the book, or if you are going to buy the book, send me an email. show, or actually go online on social media holding up a picture of the book and tag me. And I will send you a free companion workbook to go with the book, that gives you the keywords every day in a very graphic way, so that it makes each day, you have one page for each day that takes you through the work. And I'll send it by email. As I say, all you got to do is tag me on social media holding up the book and saying, hey, I got Gates of Light, because of course I want to sell some books. So
Catherine wants to know if you can show the image with the beginner books.
yes,
she
of
can
course.
take a screenshot.
Yes, of
And
course.
then Patty wants to know when you're posting your class dates for 2026, but this is it, right? You're taking a
Well, so
sabbatical?
here's the thing. There is one more class that is
Okay.
taking place on May 2nd, but it is an in-person class. So if you're in the tri-state area, I'm part of a 2-day, what I'll call sort of, well, the conference is called the Alchemy Academy. There are tarot teachers, astrology teachers, teachers of all different kinds of sort of divination systems who'll be teaching over the course of those 2 days. Some people I really respect. Honored to be asked in this group. And I'll be teaching a practice which is a 5-card spread. This is also what I do at parties. It is a Kabbalistic spread. It is, and it's also a spread that I tell people you can use this spread for yes/no questions. It will give you a yes/no answer with some nuance. It's like yes, but, or yes, and, or no, but you should consider this, or no, maybe, right? So it really gives you a kind of a range of answers for yes, no questions, and can also answer other questions as well. It is that versatile, and it's pretty simple to learn, and it is based in Kabbalistic principle. And that's what I'll be teaching in May. The place to find out about that is just look at Alchemy Academy online, and you'll see the information for that. It will take place in Amityville, out on Long Island. No horror
Amazing.
included.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark. You're the best. Go and get it. If you're curious, go do a session with Mark. It's so fun. And we'll also sort of, as you get used to working with cards, we'll speed the process along. Are you still, you're doing sessions, or are you about to shut that
Oh
down?
yes, no,
Okay.
I have a number of availability. There's openings in April, really, and actually there's a lot of openings. I cleared a lot of space because I'm busy doing another project. If you go to my calendar, you'll see there are 4 slots a day, but the reality is once 2 slots are filled, the other 2 go away. I can't do more than 2 readings a day because it takes a lot of energy. But I want to give people a range of times to choose from. So.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you. You're the best. I will
Thank
this is
you.
recorded,
Thank you.
everyone, and I will figure out how to post it and share it with you guys. And we'll do this again soon, or next year with Mark, maybe. But I will see the rest of you on some other adventure.
And join Elise out at Omega. If you've never been to the Omega
Oh yeah,
Institute,
come to Omega.
she's teaching there this summer. I taught there last year. It is such a beautiful place to go. I love it up there. I would go up there, and people just go there for R&R and don't take any classes. But there are so many wonderful things to study with, and so many great people to study with. I urge you, and if you're a follower of Elise, definitely do it.
Thanks, Mark. All right. I will see you all soon. Stay safe out there. Bye.
Bye.